Consider a man who has spent 20 years as a ghost. He has been a shadow on the wine-dark sea, a name whispered in the halls of a decaying palace, and a memory fading in the heart of a wife who has learned to live within the silence of her own grief. When this man finally stands before his own threshold, he does not come with the fanfare of a king or the light of a hero. He comes in rags, his face withered by the salt of 100 storms, his hair gone, his body stooped under the weight of 1,000 lying stories. He looks into the eyes of the woman he loves, and she sees nothing but a beggar. There is a profound tension in this moment of return, a tension between the person we claim to be and the evidence the world requires before it will allow us to be home. The question is not whether he has returned, but whether the person who left still exists in any form that can be recognized. This surfaces a strange paradox of human identity. We often believe that our self is something we carry in our minds, a collection of memories, intentions, and names. Yet, in the Homeric world, these things are remarkably fluid. Ulysses can change his name as easily as he changes his clothes. He can invent entire lineages, weaving tapestries of falsehood to protect himself from the suitors who would see him dead. But while the mind is a master of disguise, the body remains an honest narrator. There is a contradiction here that we must sit with. The more we try to curate our presence through speech and appearance, the more we find ourselves betrayed by the physical history etched into our skin. Penelope's heart remains as hard as iron, not because she is cruel, but because she knows that words are cheap in a world of wandering. She demands a proof that cannot be spoken, a truth that is rooted in something deeper than the shifting currents of the sea. To understand this tension, one must look at the world Homer lived in, a world where the boundaries between the civilized home and the chaotic wilderness were thin and permeable. In the Odyssey, the stakes of recognition are life and death. To be unknown is to be vulnerable. To be known is to be anchored. The hero's journey is often described as a series of adventures, but through the lens of the text, it is more accurately seen as a long, agonizing attempt to move from the fluidity of the ocean to the stillness of the stone wall. The sea is the realm of the nameless, where the self is constantly being eroded by the elements. The home is the realm of the rooted, where identity is built around secrets that only those within the inner sanctum can know. The first layer of this recognition begins not with the heart, but with a localized memory of pain. When the old nurse, Euryclea, washes the feet of the beggar, she encounters a scar on his leg, a mark left by the white tooth of a boar on Parnassus many years before. This scar is described as an inextinguishable mark, a permanent narrative that bypasses any social mask the hero might wear. It is a profound meditation on the relationship between trauma and identity. The scar is a record of a moment when the world ripped the self, when the boundary between the internal man and the external wilderness was breached. Homer suggests that our true identity is not found in our triumphs or our titles, but in the places where we were once broken. We are recognized by our wounds before we are accepted for our names. Consider the nature of that boar hunt. It was a formative trauma of youth, a moment of bleeding and vulnerability. Yet, 20 years later, it is the only thing that can bridge the gap of absence. The text implies that while we can mask our status and our faces, we cannot escape the marks that our experiences have etched into our physical being. The body holds the truth long before the heart is willing to accept it. When the leg falls into the bath and the copper rings out, it is the sound of reality shattering a disguise. Ulysses tries to hide the scar under his rags, fearing that the whole truth would come out before he is ready. This reveals a psychological vulnerability. The very things that make us known to others are often the things we most desire to conceal. We want to be recognized for our strength, yet it is our history of suffering that serves as our most indisputable proof. Building upon this, we must look beyond the body to the architecture of the life itself. If the scar is the proof of the individual, the marriage bed is the proof of the bond. When Ulysses finally stands before Penelope, even the scar is not enough to melt her iron heart. She remains lost in amazement, misled by his shabby clothes. The recognition of the soul requires a different kind of anchor. Ulysses's distress peaks when Penelope suggests moving their bed. This is where the core insight of the rooted self emerges. The marriage bed is not a piece of furniture. It is a marvelous curiosity built around a living olive tree that grows within the precincts of the house. Ulysses used this tree as a centerpost, weaving the stone walls and the silver inlaid wood around a living, rooted entity. This architectural detail suggests that the ultimate sanctuary of a person's life, their most intimate connection, is not something that can be shifted or moved. It is literally anchored in the earth. The tension here lies between the wandering of the hero across the fluid, unstable sea and the immovable center of the home. Homer is proposing that a deep human bond is not merely a social contract. It is a rooted reality that integrates the natural world into the human structure. If the bed can be moved, it means the olive tree has been cut down at its roots. To Ulysses, the movement of the bed is equivalent to the destruction of the self. He asks whether the tree is still there, for if it has been removed, the very foundation of his 20-year struggle has been rendered meaningless. One wonders what this implies about the nature of the self in our own time. If we are truly at home only when we have found that which cannot be moved, what happens to those who live in a state of perpetual shifting? The text argues that the stability of the inner world is dependent on these physical living anchors that remain even when we are absent for decades. The secret of the bed is what finally dissolves Penelope's coldness. Recognition occurs only when two people share a secret that is physically manifest in the world. It is the intersection of a private memory and a public, rooted object. Without the tree at the center, the house is just a collection of stones. Without the scar on the leg, the king is just a man in rags. This leads us to a deeper complication. The body as an archive and the home as a sanctuary both point toward a definition of the self that is remarkably static. If we are defined by our scars and our rooted trees, is there any room for the transformation we so often seek? Homer seems to view the self as something that is discovered through a return, rather than something that is invented through a journey. The wandering is a trial, a stripping away of the unnecessary, until only the inextinguishable marks remain. The lying stories that Ulysses tells are not just survival tactics. They are the fluid layers of a personality that must be shed before the valiant warrior can be unified with the suffering body. Think of the marvelous curiosity of your own life, that which you have built your walls around. We all have an olive tree that we believe is immovable. It might be a conviction, a memory, or a relationship that we assume is anchored in the bedrock of our existence. But the fear Ulysses expresses that someone might have cut down the tree in his absence is a psychological reality for us all. It is the fear that while we were out wandering, the center of our world was quietly being eroded. If the bed is no longer rooted, are we still the person who built it? Or are we destined to remain beggars at our own gates, forever unrecognized because the secrets we carry no longer have a place to land? As we reflect on these ancient images, several questions emerge that do not offer easy resolutions. If you were stripped of your name, your clothes, and your current status, what scar remains on your body that would allow those who truly know you to identify you? When you consider the inner sanctum of your life, is it built around something that is alive and rooted, or is it merely a collection of furniture that could be shifted by any passing storm? Finally, if the heart requires a secret to be articulated before it will accept the truth of a person's presence, what are the unspoken foundations that hold your own world together? We are left with the image of Ulysses and Penelope, finally reunited, not because they have forgotten the 20 years of pain, but because they have confirmed that the rooted thing still stands. Yet the scar remains. The boar's tooth did not go away just because the king returned. The wound is as much a part of the homecoming as the embrace. Perhaps the weight we carry is not a burden to be discarded, but the very evidence required to prove we are finally home. The olive tree is still in the earth, but the man who built around it is no longer the man who began the work. He is a composite of the stone wall and the salt water, the rooted post and the inextinguishable mark.